Parsha Tetzaveh. Welcome. Judaism is a way of life that places great emphasis on minute details. There's a way to make meat kosher, there's a way not to make it kosher. Even a tiny discernible nick in a slaughter knife, it will be the difference between glut kosher steak tonight or everything in the garbage pail. And that is a very fact. As a shochet, I can testify to that. A mezuzah is written in a very specific manner, and prayers needs to be recited in a certain way. Very much controlled is the ceremonial aspect of Judaism. As well, there are very specific rules as to the conditions under which a temple service was to be continued and conducted. There is a considerable amount of protocol. The priest had to be properly dressed, attired. It will be a grave sin for him to officiate in the temple without his priestly garments. He had to be anointed with specially prepared olive oil. And oh yes, one more thing, he had to be a descendant of Aaron. It says in the Torah, "You, Moses, should bring near to yourself your brother Aaron and his sons. Make holy vestments for your brother Aaron, and for honor and glory, and Aaron will bear the names of Israel on the breastplate on his heart when he enters the sanctuary as a constant reminder before God." This was one fancy set of clothes. Every Kohen priest had 4 special garments that he wore for the temple services. The high priest had 8. Nachmanis explains that these were similar to royal garments of the day. In the Purim story, the Persian king tried to demonstrate his prestige by wearing the high priest garments, which the Babylonians had stolen when they destroyed the temple. Yes, these were very special clothes. There was a breastplate that was embedded with precious stones. These stones were engraved with the names of the tribes of Israel. There was a crown with the words "sanctified to God" on them. Without every one of these clothes, without them being perfectly clean and perfectly tailored, the service was invalid. But the clothes were not the most important part. "You, Moses, shall bring near to yourself your brother Aaron." Moses was happy to see that his tribe had been selected for this great honor. After all, the Levites are a very distinguished tribe. Who, if not they, should be honored by having one of their own anointed as high priest? God corrected Moses and said, "You shall bring your brother Aaron." What's the difference here? It has nothing to do with being a Levite. It had to do with being Aaron, being the personality of Aaron. The Talmud goes on to state that although he needs to be anointed, his service not a service unless the names of the tribe are engraved up over his heart and is written, and Aaron will bear the names of the children of Israel on the breastplate, on his heart, when he enters the sanctuary, as a constant reminder before God. The Yalkut Yehuda explains further. People sometimes make the mistake of putting tribal pride first. The Talmud dispels this notion by stating, his service is not a service unless the names of the tribes of Israel are engraved over his heart and is written, and Aaron will bear the names of the children of Israel on the breastplate on his heart when he enters the sanctuary as a constant reminder before God. Yes, the high priest must be anointed. Yes, he must wear his high priestly uniform, complete with a breastplate. And yes, all the engraved names. Without those requirements, the temple service will be a waste of time. Actually, much more worse than that, or perhaps of even greater importance, however, was the fact that Aaron will bear the names of the children of Israel on his broad. must be in his heart. What made Aaron so special was the fact that the children of Israel was engraved in his heart. They were his people. He loved and cherished them and blessed them and constantly prayed for their well-being. Another person would have put on the high priest clothes and being anointed with the proper oil. But if you weren't Aaron, it would not work. During the time of the Second Temple, the high priest was, for the most part, a political position. Sometimes even two high priests were appointed. The official titular high priest and the fellow who actually does the work and goes into the sanctuary in the temple. Rabbi King Spiro, in his online crash course in Jewish history, writes, according to the Talmud, during the first temple period of about 410 years, there were only high 18 priests. During the second temple period of 420 years, there were actually 300 high priests. We know from the Talmud, Yoma, Daf 9a, that Yochanan was high priest for 80 years, Shimon was high priest for 40 years, and Ishmael for 10 years. That means in the remaining 290 years, there were 298 priests, one less than a year or so. They were dropping like flies. Another year, another high priest, and so the story goes on. What was it? After all, they did what they were supposed to do. They wear the garments, they wear the breastplates, they were anointed, they wear the crown, they wore their costumes. But inside, they were not Aaron. They were not like Aaron, and that was the problem. The clothes were just a cover. If a person who is worthy of serving as a high priest does what he is supposed to do, including dressing the part, he is truly a high priest. However, the clothes alone are not insufficient. You can pour anointing oil on his head, and you can dress him in his high priestly garments. You can put the breastplate on him. But if he is not Aaron, he is nothing. He is not a person who will bear the names of children of Israel on his heart. He will be nothing more than a well-dressed, oily phony. We have seen in Israel, Durban, United Nations, Ramallah, Iran, a group of misfits dressed in traditional Hasidic garb joined these groups of Israel haters, men who looked for all the world like traditional religious Jews, publicly denounced Israel and Jews. How do children of Holocaust survivors participate in such a conference, manner, whose purpose was to die the obvious truth? How could they stand arm in arm with people who want to see them dead? How can they kiss a Jew murderer, a Jew hater? The clowns who went to Tehran may very well keep strictly kosher homes. They may well observe the Shabbat, put on tefillin every week and put on tefillin, but their disgraceful actions indicate that there is not a lot happening in their lives when it comes to genuinely serving God and His children. They are not Aaron. A rabbi does not embrace the Nazis. A rabbi does not kiss a murderer of Jews. He is someone who looks like a rabbi and embraces Nazis. All that means that he couldn't possibly be a rabbi. There are those who could choose to criticize Torah Judaism for the perceived overemphasis of ceremony regulation. They are, of course, wrong. When God writes in His Torah that He expects us to observe the minutiae of Jewish law, He obviously indicates that it is of the utmost importance. However, in one respect, they are correct. It is possible to lose oneself in the pomp and glory and circumstance of religious ritual. A person can dress like a high priest. He can go through the sundry rituals of being a high priest, but if someone looks like a high priest and doesn't act like a high priest, he is nothing but a phony, empty suit. Clothes does not make a man. Have a great Shabbat.